Being poor is tough, but it hits especially hard during the holidays. Halloween is the first reminder that you don't have the disposable income for your kids' happiness. I took Austin down to a local thrift store we visited frequently. They had a rack of reject costumes from supermarkets, a few cheap latex masks, corny novelty party hats, and one very well-made green and yellow bellied dragon costume that looked like it could fit Austin and Austin only. Sitting alone next to a golf bag full of hockey sticks. It was painstakingly detailed. It had scales that actually shimmered, interlocked in tiny emerald shields, each with their own special symbol. Hard like crystal, lighter than glass or even plastic. It was cute enough to make adults smile and remarkable enough to finally make my poor son the envy of all the rich kids at his school. My son jumped into it without waiting. I appreciated the workmanship on the rubber-soled feet, individual fingers with claws, and a lifelike tail and jaw. No stitches, no tag, custom handmade. Austin took the head of the dragon and slid it over his own, his bright smile, eclipsed by the black mesh inside the dragon's open mouth. He begged me to get it. It wasn't cheap, at least for us, but well worth it for Austin. Austin wore the costume all day from then on. That was the 27th, when he went to his first friend's costume party of many. He was the hit of every one, so it was no wonder why he loved the dragon so much that he wanted to sleep in it. Seeing as how it was one giant plush and armored sleeping bag, we agreed. It seemed like, he kinda had to. The kid did all his chores and homework in that costume as if he was trying to buy a favor with us before he asked if he could keep the costume on. We said yes. Even at school he could wear it until Halloween. Austin's school is very open-minded. The students loved the costume as much as everybody else. Even the teacher was fine with letting Austin keep it on during school hours. It was the first week where Austin the Dragon didn't get in trouble. Austin even got a rare A on his spelling test during the week before Halloween. He ate his veggies and brushed his teeth through a slot in the mesh that was hard to see at times, and it sounded like he was showering every night without us needing to tell him to. Why not let the kid have some fun? Austin's last Halloween is my bet for the best Halloween nights any kid has ever had. Every house was its own little amusement park of treats and decorations, almost all of them for Austin the Dragon, a legend that every kid spread at school. It seemed that every adult played along as knights or maidens or queens, or even some of the other kids copied his costume, leading a band of dragons to terrorize the neighborhoods looking for chocolate late into the weekday night. What we feared would happen came true on the 1st of November. Austin refused to get out of the costume. He was never a shrieker or a kicker before, but he was when my wife or I tried to unzip the back, or reach for the head of the dragon. After an hour of arguing and tears, we finally caved and sent our kid out to school, looking like a fool. When my wife called me that afternoon saying it was the school and that it was an emergency, all I could imagine was a group of bullies beating up my son in this costume. I rushed all the way to the school's nurse's room, where I saw my son on his stomach, laying on the reclined bed, still in the dragon. The nurse told us that a kickball had flown over the fence and bounced off a truck's bumper, launching the ball onto a lamppost and then back onto my son's head as he was walking out of lunch. A strange event, a stroke of bad luck, path of the storm and all that. The nurse didn't have good news, said the helmet inside the costume may have saved his life, as she could still feel a pulse with the costume on. Austin was unconscious and may have been hemorrhaging. We needed to get it off of him. The helmet was stuck tight. So were the side and bottom zippers. The nurse had to ask a custodian for a pair of pliers to get a better grip on the zipper tabs. The nurse clamped onto it and tugged. My wife helped her. I should have left it alone, but I helped the two of them. With all three of us straining, the zipper peeled down slowly, like an embedded knife, drawing through a torso with a sound that reminded me of wet wood splitting. The space above the zipper split open to a deep crimson gash, flashing bones, muscles, and organs. My wife screamed as the nurse yanked up the zipper, closing the oozing, bleeding zippers as best as she could as we picked him up. We followed our son in the facility, school van / emergency ambulance to the nearest ER, and waited until dark, until 2 women and 2 men entered our son's ER wearing medical scrubs that were bright white, while the others wore powder green. They each carried an official kind of walk, kind of a march with matching bright blue soled nurses' shoes. They looked odd, like actors in a play, but as out of place as they seemed, this new crew gave my wife and I hope. 10 minutes later, 2 of them walked out, one carrying the costume of the dragon, the other the head. One said to the other, "Just be a little more time, and his meal would have been done. Shame. Still, I can't believe they let one of us get all the way to a thrift store," as they walked off down the hall, ignoring us. My wife followed them while I waited by the door for the other 2. When the 3 of them left, a man exited the ER in a hurry. The last woman spoke in a strange accent to the man that left, like she learned English from a speech bot. "You can't do that here." The man's voice was quick and sleek. "Rules don't apply here, man-eater. This is just the cattle pen." I physically stopped the man with my arm. His brown eyes ruffled and shot down at me in an indignant fury as I asked, "Do you know anything about my son Austin?" "Why would I know anything about your son?" The doctor wore one of those metal reflective discs on his head and a stethoscope that belonged on a TV set. His mask hid everything but those angry eyes. He smelled like gasoline made out of limes. I asked him what he was doing in an ER with that group and who he was. "Do you think I wear this mask just to advertise who I am?" He broke the contact with my hand and walked out of sight. I was so pissed. I almost followed him before my wife, running, came back to me, breathless. She said those doctors stole the costume by walking out of the hospital, getting into a parked car, and driving away. We came back to the ER and found the group standing outside, waiting for us. The doctors tried to explain that they didn't know what to do as the costume appeared to be fused with Austin's skin. No matter where they cut into Austin. Nobody knew who the group of strange 4 were, how they got the costume off. My wife and I pushed our way in past the barricaded bodies to see the half-digested bloody mess from hell all over the operating table and room. In the mess was Austin's watch, pickled and shriveled, like it had been sitting in his stomach for nearly a week. I ran from the ER so quickly that my shoes slipped off halfway through the sprint. The first thing my eyes landed on was the blue bathroom symbol, and I bolted there to throw up and have my breakdown. The men's door was propped open, and I had no shoes left to make a sound. That's why the arrogant doctor who blew past me didn't stop using the toilet. He didn't hear me or see me. He was standing at one of the toilet stalls with his bright blue-soled shoes at one of the stalls, standing half in and half out between an open door, the front of his head out of view. I saw what looked like his deflated face and neck resting on his shoulders like a coat hood when not in use. He then grabbed his own face with fake lips and empty eye holes and pulled it out of view into the stall as he put it on. I heard what might have been a zipper closing up, and I swore I saw his body jerk up a bit, like he just noticed I was standing there watching everything. I bolted out, back to the arms of my crying wife. We called the staff, and we waited for the man in the men's room to exit. When no one did, we searched the place and found nothing but the toilet he was using filled with blood and half-digested chunks of bone. I had heard rumors of the game's existence on various gaming sites and message boards, but I never guessed it to be real. I spent a little over a year trying to track down a copy, but came up empty-handed. That was until a few weeks ago when the game decided to find me. I'm here to beg you, do not go looking for it. If an unfamiliar game shows up at your door, leave it be. It can disguise itself under any platform and does not abide by the rules of our universe. If you are unfortunate or stupid enough to play it, I will provide instructions below to hopefully give you a fighting chance. The game decided to present itself to me on a Sunday at 12 a.m. It had manifested itself into a blank Nintendo 64 cartridge with no writing or sticker logo and was placed outside my front door with no note or instruction. I paced around for 20 minutes and tried to comprehend where it had come from and who delivered it. Eventually, I hooked up my console and inserted the cartridge. My version of the game had titled itself Halloween 64, and even included an inverted Nintendo logo. It had also displayed a few fake development countries like Eulogy Incorporated and The Last Breath Software. The main title screen showed the words Halloween 64, press start, and text made to look like running green slime. As soon as the game begins, you will be unable to quit it until it is complete. I'm sure you are thinking, just turn it off, plug it, and walk away. If only it were that easy. The game has several methods of self-defense, and the harder you try and disrupt it, the stronger it becomes. The power function of the N64 console will not respond if you try and turn it off. The red power light remains on and the system operates like normal. The cartridge cannot be removed. It does not matter how hard you pull, it will stay locked in place. If you annoy it enough, the cartridge will become scalding hot and will burn your skin to the bone. All outside communication will be lost. Your phone and internet will not function while the game is running. Any door or window that leads to the outside world will be inaccessible. My front door would not open, and all my windows became shatterproof. To be honest, I am not sure if time even passes while playing the game, as every clock in my apartment remained at 12 while playing. You were given 10 lives. Certain aspects in the game will be mirrored in reality. Any pets you own will die as soon as you lose a life. As you lose more lives, you will get sick. Very sick. I became nauseous. My head started to pound and my nose began to bleed. The more lives you lose, the worse you will feel. But you must keep playing. I can only conclude that losing all lives will result in your actual death. Level 1, the neighborhood. The character of Level 1 is a child dressed in a skeleton costume, carrying a jack-o'-lantern bucket. The exact costume I wore when I was 6 years old for Halloween. Your character starts in the middle of a suburban neighborhood that is covered with cheap Halloween decor. The street had a striking resemblance to the one I grew up on, which I am guessing is a detail that changes with each player. The only ability you have is movement. You cannot jump, punch, or use items in this level. Although the street appears linear and endless, as though it is an infinite loop, it is not. As you move forward, the streetlights behind you will go out. Do not go into the dark. Keep moving. If you move your character into the dark, you will lose a life. As you play, you will notice the darkness creeping behind you in reality. After a few hours of running down the virtual street, all the lights in my apartment went out one by one. Whatever you hear, see, or feel, it is very important to not take your eyes off the screen during this level. You will hear doors in your home open and close, footsteps, even a familiar voice whisper in your ear. Do not lose concentration, or you will lose more lives. You may even feel a hand rest on your shoulder. When the game gets bored of level 1, it will end without notice. The timer on the screen showed that I ran for 7 hours and 26 minutes before it ended. Level 2, the house. Level 2 is displayed in first person. You will enter a house with limited visibility, as a dim flashlight is your only source of illumination. As you progress through this level, you'll notice a climate change around you in reality. My apartment was freezing, making it extremely difficult to concentrate. Again, you must keep playing. If you get up and try to adjust your thermostat or get a coat, you will lose a life. I lost 4 lives during this level and started coughing up blood. As you move through the house, you will discover various weapons. When you recover all the weapons, you can progress to level 3. These weapons cannot be used in self-defense. It is best not to equip them, as your character will only use them to commit suicide, thus resulting in the loss of more lives. As you move through the dark house, you will hear and see things that will test your limits as a human being. I will not go into detail, but I saw and heard things on that screen that were deeply personal, disturbing, and worst of all, genuine. Be prepared to witness every terrible experience of your past. All of those things you have repressed, forgotten, and maybe even went to therapy to try and work through. Once again, you must keep playing, and you must collect each weapon. Level 3, final level. I entered this level with 2 remaining lives, almost certain that I was destined to fail. Like the former levels, I believe that it custom tailored to the person who was playing. Again, this level remains in first-person view. You'll enter a bedroom and see a person lying on a bed, asleep. They may resemble a loved one, a friend, or yourself. I saw the body, my best friend who passed away 10 years ago. You'll have access to every weapon you grab in level 2. A knife, blowtorch, baseball bat, and screwdriver. Your objective is simple. Kill the person in the bed. They will not fight back or move. Once their health bar is diminished, you'll win the game. I chose the knife. I walked into the bed, aimed, and struck the body with the blade. White hot pain filled my eyes, and I instantly discovered the catch of level 3. Whatever pain you inflict on that person, you will feel in reality. You will not lose any blood, you will not lose consciousness, and you will not die. But you will feel every single sensation. If you take too long in between blows, your player will lose a life. The person on the bed will beg you to stop. They will scream your name again and again. It took me 20 minutes to stab them to death, and I could barely hold the controller when it was over. I completed it with 1 life remaining. My physical body was cold, frail, and broken. I remember reading "Game complete" on the screen just before blacking out. I'm not sure who the game will choose next, or if it already has. I just pray that they will read this before it is too late. Tomorrow, my sister would be 23. It's going to be a rough one for my parents, but I don't think they've given up hope that any second she'll breeze right in the front door to blow out the candles on her cake. She won't, of course. I think my sister might be dead. She was always so stupid. Please understand that I say that with all love. Laura was naive and trusting, gullible. The police still think she ran off with one of her many past flings. Any boy could have told her any lie, and she'd swallow a story, hook, line, and sinker. I tried my best, as her older sister, to instill her with some kind of backbone, to help her hone her skepticism. I was the older and warier sister, the cynic. The fact that she's still missing is evidence of my failures. It was a Halloween party. The invitation was the most gorgeous thing I'd seen in my life. A gold leaf pressed oak leaf with alluring cursive in words of silver. Pinterest would have lost its collective mind over the craftsmanship. Laura never told me where the invitation came from. Only then it was the members of the in crowd of her small liberal art college who received them. Exclusive. Of course, she wanted to go. It was her last hurrah of youth. The final year before school let out, and she had to face the real world as an adult. Parties in the graduating year take on a sort of desperation. Like a single chick on a New Year's frantically searching the crowd for a kiss in the final minute of the countdown. I don't miss college, and I don't miss college parties. But Laura wouldn't go alone. She was adamant. Halloween was always my favorite holiday, and she used that in the week it took her to wear me down, talking about costumes and how we were going to show up everyone else. She wanted to be the hottest one there. I wasn't resentful that standing next to my plain self would make her shine all the brighter. I wasn't. She wanted to be the it girl of the in crowd. I love the challenge of sewing the costumes. Found some incredible patterns for flapper girls from the roaring 20s. Laura didn't catch the irony of me bashing hers on Daisy Buchanan of The Great Gatsby. It suited her. She was stunning in it, though. She could have worn a burlap sack and had the same effect. We spent the day of the party hanging out and catching up. Laura sat on the counter of my tiny studio apartment, sipping rosé and cracking jokes while I baked brownies. She brought the bottle for herself. I don't drink at parties. The brownies were a gift for the host. Laura teased me about it because it's not going to be that kind of party, silly. Not some house party where nachos were considered a home-cooked meal, she meant. Not the kind of party I usually got invited to. Technically, I hadn't been invited at all, which, of course, is why I wanted to bring brownies in the first place. Mom always told us we should never show up empty-handed at a gathering. A bottle of wine would have been more appropriate, but I guess I couldn't bring myself to actually face going into a liquor store to buy one. I hadn't drunk in a year, not since the last party I'd been to. I didn't have a sobriety chip to mark the occasion, just the scars. I don't mind taking the role of DD. It puts my mind at ease knowing I can offer a safe ride home so no one else has to try anything stupid. The autumn drive was golden. The setting rays of the sun lit the woods like each tree was emitting their own light. The air through the open car windows was perfume, the sweetness of leaves beginning to decay. I have a perfectly clear memory of the light hitting Laura's profile at the perfect angle to make her eyes glow as she grinned and fiddled with the music, carefree and unburdened in a snapshot of what should have been a perfect day. We took some wrong turns. The invitation's directions were precise, but the twists and turns of small, rural roads got the best of us a few times. So it wasn't until after sunset that we found the cluster of other cars and an otherwise unassuming patch of bare dirt that let us know we had arrived at the right place. We went the rest of the way on foot, guided by the sound of music. I thought the invitation had been a work of art, but it paled in comparison to the spectacle that was the rest of the party. If you gathered the greatest minds of the greatest hipster wedding blogs and shut them in a think tank with an unlimited budget for a month, you might get something close. The clearing was dominated at the center by a single tree, the most massive oak tree I've ever seen in my life. The boughs were laden with what must have been hundreds of colored glass jars, each lit by a tiny flickering candle. My camera! My sister clutched my arm suddenly. I can't believe I forgot my camera. I was too awestruck to respond. Belatedly, I realized the music that had led us down the path was alive. A 5-piece acoustic band played something I imagined to be the background soundtrack of Florence Welch's Brain. Though I'd poured my heart and soul into our costumes, I suddenly felt very inadequate and underdressed. Apparently, it was a themed party. Nearly every other guest was in elaborate stage-quality costumes that could have, at any second, broken into a production of A Midsummer Night's Dream. A masquerade menagerie of forest animals milled through the clearing. The animal head masks were startlingly detailed. A hawk glared sideways at me from across a massive bonfire, and the flames danced in the liquid reflection of his resin eye. There was a collective shift as we entered the scene. Subtle, but they're all the same, as if we were understudies that had disrupted the flow of a rehearsal. Ah, I thought. Theater majors. A stag-headed man stepped smoothly through the space to greet us. His voice was muffled through the mask, but baritone and pleasant. I wondered if he belonged to the band and was taking a break. Welcome! We're glad you made it. It's a bit of a labyrinth on these country roads. Please, help yourself to any refreshments you'd like. We're only just getting started. He gestured to a pair of long, low wooden tables laden with platters of mouth-watering food. I was suddenly eager to hide my own offering behind my back, but our host was gracious about it. A gift, he said. How very old-fashioned of you. Thank you. I believe there's room on the end of the table. I know it looks typed out like that, but he didn't make it sound like an insult. Laura was only half paying attention, still taking in the drool-worthy decorations. I knew she was seething at herself for leaving the camera behind. As a photographer, that thing was practically a third eye for her. Our host excused himself, and I was relieved to spot others I recognized from Laura's social group. Now that my eyes had adjusted, they were easy to pick out. It was obvious we weren't the only ones who didn't know this party was going to be themed. The guy, in an ironic sexy nurse costume, looked acutely self-conscious. Most were gathered around the tables, with cups in their hands, awkwardly waiting for the alcohol to kick in, dependent on it as a social lubricant. I squinted at the dishes. There was no way those were real silver, right? Laura's friends cooed over her get-up and filled her in on everything they'd observed so far. Heavy smoke from the main bonfire veiled the partygoers. I guess they were using green wood. The crowd flowed in circles like a massive slow-motion square dance. Some were handing out party favors to others, ribbons and flower crowns and things like that. Groups formed and dissolved according to some unknowable pattern, shifting the motes of dust in a beam of sunlight. People came and went, obscured by the smoke, as the sky deepened in silky darkness. I was stiff and awkward on the fringes of the crowd. Everyone had a drink in their hand, and it seemed like everyone wanted to put one in mine. I waved off more offers than I could count. A sparrow, a rabbit, a pair of feral-looking foxes. With the many masks, it felt like feeding day at the petting zoo. Only, I was the animal in the pen. It was overwhelming, overstimulating. I couldn't focus well enough to carry on a conversation. Each thought I had was as hard to catch as the smoke that stung my eyes and settled heavy in my lungs. It was perfumed with something. I thought until I saw a bear throw a leafy branch onto the flames. The fragrance was only leaves. I don't drink at parties. I had very little to do until the music picked up and I felt something wild sing out in my blood. A ripple of excitement made waves through the party, and wordlessly the people began to dance. I finally saw Laura and the stag-headed host lead her into the middle of it all. What was his name? Had he even said? Even as I joined the dance, I kept to the edges of it. My feet were clumsy, and I didn't know the steps. Some sort of folk dance with a lot of twirling and getting passed back and forth. Maybe every 1 in 20 people I linked arms with were one of Laura's friends. They were having an easier time of it, the gloss of drunkenness in their eyes, their movements freer as their inhibitions loosened. There was something happening to us. The dance was too fast for us to speak, and I couldn't make myself form words, but there was an understanding with every fleeting spin when we made eye contact. Our feet picked up, faster and higher. There was something happening to us. I broke the flow of a dance like a heavy stone thrown in a still pond, pushing and jostling my way out. I needed to be away from the smoke and the touching. Hands on my elbow, hands on my arm, my shoulders as each dancer tried to pull me back in. A forest of grabbing hands and leering teeth and fixed grins. I couldn't breathe. In the harsh shadows cast by the flicker of flames, the mask warped and changed. The fur looked denser, the feathers more jeweled. What at the beginning of the night appeared rubber, now moved like flesh. Animal eyes rolled in their sockets to watch me as I struggled through. I had to find Laura. She was still with the stag, a tiara on her head. It shone with the luster of real gold, though. I could have sworn I'd only seen plastic before. An ornate clay bottle was being passed hand to hand through the dance. The stag's eyes met mine as he took a swig. The lips somehow warped and wrapped around the neck of the bottle as if they were his own. He laughed and his tongue was wine-stained. The dance changed, somehow impossibly faster. Wilder. Hands were still on me, but this time to push me away rather than pull me in. I was forced out. Away from the smoke wasn't any better. Fog lay heavy and thick under the branches. The air was cleaner, though. It smelled like cool water and the promise of rain. I couldn't get a sense of time. I couldn't separate this party from the last. I couldn't separate myself from the self of a year ago. I wasn't drunk this round, but the confusion and thoughtless panic were the same. What happened to me then wasn't happening now. I hadn't had a drop to drink this time around. Something touched my hands and I wheeled back. I hit the dirt hard and scrambled back until I couldn't anymore. hemmed in by brush. I couldn't get my legs to obey me, to lift me off the ground and run. I was as helpless as the first time. It was the hawk. When he spoke, his words were strained, warped, coming out of a throat never meant to mimic human speech. "It's rude," he was saying. "It's rude to refuse a host's generosity the way you have. We've offered you everything you could want, fine drinks and food and music and trinkets, and you take nothing. You're ungrateful, and your insults will not be tolerated." There was something in his hand, and it glinted coldly. My stomach dropped. I could think of nothing to do. I could think of nothing at all. I was going to die here without ever understanding why. Then, he stopped. The stag was there. I hadn't seen him arrive. The whole party was behind him, the music dead. They watched, with bloodshot eyes, foam at the corners of their wretched mouths. "It is not our guest who is being rude. See, she has brought a gift for us." My brownies, they were still on the table, crappy paper plate nestled among silver platters and crystal bowls. Somehow, they even looked crappier than before. The stag leaned close to the hawk and lowered his voice. "So watch your tongue, lest you lose it. Some of us still abide by the rules of old-fashioned hospitality." He winked at me. His eyelid was creased. He had never looked more real. Certainly, he was more real than I was. I was nothing but a creature in a trap. I was nothing but formless fear and confusion piled in human skin. Laura's arm was still linked with his. The fire lit her face like she was emitting her own light, a pretty illusion. She didn't say a word. Her eyes were drunk and far away. I became aware of the music once more. Farther away this time, the dance resumed like nothing had ever disturbed it. The crowd ebbed and flowed, moving in unknowable patterns, but every step took them farther away from me. By the time shame got me back on my feet, they were on the far side of the clearing. The oak had been stripped of its lights, and I could see them bobbing and weaving with the dancers as they slipped through the trees and into the mist. I couldn't catch up with them. Everywhere I put my feet was wrong. Every step there was something to trip on or something to snag my costume, forcing me to fall even further while I entangled myself. At some point, I lost them. I stood alone in the bone-chilling fog until violent shivers ripped me from my stupor. Somehow, I found my car again. Somehow, I got it started and drove home without ever having a thought. The next day, I reported my sister as missing. All I could tell them was that we had gone to a party and she had left with a guy I didn't know. I tried showing them the invitation. It was tacky spray paint and metallic marker on a crumbling leaf. Not at all like I remembered it. In mid-November, I went back to the clearing in broad daylight. It took me hours of wrong turns to find. It was so much smaller than I recalled. If not for the oak, I would have thought it wasn't the same place at all. The oak was dead and rotting where it stood. There was a table of sorts, a fallen tree with a roughly hewn chunk out of the top to make a lumpy surface. None of the craftsmanship I admired. The whole area was littered with garbage, crushed plastic bottles, filthy cans and plastic bags. Here and there were trampled pieces of cheap plastic costume jewelry, the kind you find in the kids' party section of dollar stores. I retraced my steps the best I could. A little beyond where I remembered stopping, the ground gave way to a ravine. Not a deep one. Not the kind you can lose a party of 200. Just 6 feet deep. Just enough to loom over my head as I studied the end of it. where the exposed roots of a tree above the ravine reached down and formed a rough arch, with nothing but solid rock between them. Tomorrow is my sister's birthday. She's not going to waltz back home like she's attending some twisted surprise party. It's too early for that. The door won't be open yet. I'm finally ready to talk about what happened last Halloween. Because this one, when the door opens again, I'll be going through to bring her home.